To expand on what you're saying about the not being too easily swayed by other people's opinions, like I remember we talked about this like last week. Like I think growing up, I was always kind of a person that questioned authority. And to me, it's like I was always being told like you have to do things this way, you have to do things that way. Like I always got the impression that life seems so structured, but then I always had my mind always questioned like why is things so like set in stone? Like why, like for example, why do I have to go to college to be successful or make a maybe not even successful, just make a good living? I'm just like, why do I have to go to a college and then transfer to another one and get good grades? Why do I have to take these classes? Why do I have to listen to you? And stuff like that. So I think I was always the type that was actively looking for alternatives because I didn't want to follow like this path that was kind of carved for me. Like if you tell me you have to do it this way, I'm going to find a way to not do it that way. Like that's just kind of how I was for some reason. But then at the same time, it benefited me because when I went to community college just out of like not really knowing what else I was gonna do. Like I'm like, okay, well if this is the way, then let me go and figure it out along the way. But I always had this feeling of like this doesn't seem to work. Like no one here at this school, like the video classes that I was taking at community college, it's like they don't give you any good criticisms. They don't seem to really be caring about what they're teaching you. They don't even explain why some of the things are the way that they are. They just tell you this is it. And didn't really have a good way to back it up. I was like, there has to be something else. I'm like, there's nothing just felt right with me in that environment. I was never a school person. So I was always naturally looking for alternatives. And then when that mentorship opportunity came up, that's why I hopped on it. Cause I'm like, okay, maybe this can be something that actually works. And then when he was telling me all these things that were contradictory to what I was told growing up, it was kind of scary at first, but at the same time I was like, you know, what's the worst that can happen? I go back to school? Like that's not that bad. And then, or go back and tell people like, yeah, I made a dumb decision. Like, yeah, it's like what's the harm in that in reality? Like if you have a big ego, that's really big harm to some people. But to me, I was like just having some blind faith in going about it and like figuring something out and seeing what the other options are is like what really helped out. And because people were always telling me, it's like, oh, you should at least finish with an AA degree. My thought was like, well, AA degrees are useless. And then it's like, well, you spent so much time already doing it and yada yada. It's like, oh, you should at least finish. And well, I just like, what's the point if they're not even like, if it just didn't feel right to me. So there was always that kind of like following a gut feeling. And I always connected it to like, well, if this guy is actively doing it and telling me to quit my job and not focus on school and just focus on working in the field, like those words have some weight to it because he has like the experience to back it up. So I would just do it. And then when things started to actually like work and like I was actually learning and working, that's when he told me, I was like, okay, there was an alternative. And then even when I was in film, I was always told this, you enter a whole new world of being told like a structured set of things. Like I remember, like I wanted to be a DP, and at first like I thought that you had to be an assistant camera for X amount of time before you can actually be a DP. And then my mentor was always telling me, oh no, just go shoot stuff. Like that's not really the case. But then some of the people that he worked with, like they were more like, no, you're supposed to be an AC for this amount of time, and then that's when you work up the ranks and become a DP. And it's like when I didn't want to do that, and I was listening to my mentor's advice of just DP things, and then that's how you do it, they would like talk shit all the time. Like he's doing it so wrong. He's like trying to cut corners and stuff like that. It's like, how can he really do anything with that if he doesn't even know like how everything works in like the positions that assist a DP or whatever. And I was like, dude, and then I'm over here, I'm like, dude, I just got a gig to like DP something. I'm like, to me, it was just kind of like, I could have easily given into that and be like, all right, I'll be the assistant camera guy or whatever. But because I just kind of chose to not listen to that and just follow like what felt right, and also what my mentor was saying, like I was DPing stuff, and it's like I never really assistant cameraed like on stuff. Like I didn't spend a dramatic amount of time setting up lights for people. Like I just did it, and then the people that you work with, they make that connection, like, okay, this guy's a DP. It's like, it doesn't even matter if you're good. Like when you're working at that level in the beginning, it's like most people that you work with aren't that good. So it's like they would look at me, it's like, he's a DP, he's great, I need him to work on my projects. They're all like low budget projects, but I was being brought onto that. Versus now when I look back on it, if I had caved into that like pressure of like, no, you need to be like an assistant camera or a lighting assistant first, I noticed looking back on it now, if I did that, what would have happened is people would have categorized me as someone who is an assistant camera, categorized me as someone who is a lighting guy. So one thing that I kind of learned from all that was you have to be careful sometimes on what you choose to do and how you kind of present yourself, because if someone meets you as an assistant camera, they're gonna be like, I want you to be an AC on this production. Like, okay, you go do that. So another person's like, I want you to AC on my production over here. It's like, okay. And then it ends up being this chain of like doing work that you don't really want to do.
Yeah, you kind of pigeonhole yourself into one sort of particular sort of trade that maybe you don't like. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that was actually the case for the person that was telling me, you need to be an assistant camera first. I watch him work. I don't think that's the case now, but at the time, he was always doing the assistant camera gigs, and he was like pissed off all the time because he was doing something he didn't want to do. But because I did it the other way around, it was like, I want to be the DP. Like that same thing happened, but for work that I actually wanted to be doing. And then there was another guy that I worked with a couple times. What's really funny is that growing up watching skateboarding videos, there's some filmers that were actually like very recognized in that niche. One of those guys actually ended up being someone that I met and worked with like on set. And he was giving me advice too. And he filmed all my favorite skateboarders. And then one piece of advice that always stuck with me is he said, when you're first starting out, say yes to everything, no matter what the pay is, and just do it, and do it as best as you can. I owe that piece of advice to like getting on the productions that I have worked on, or not even that, just being able to make a living doing it. It's because you say yes to so many people. It's like you're planting all these seeds. 99% of them may not work with you consistently, but the 1% that does is what keeps you employed consistently, which is basically the people that I work with now. It's really only like maybe 3 people, maybe 4 max, that employ me like as a DP or a videographer consistently, but it's those like 3 to 4 people that actively keep me busy. Mm-hmm. And then eventually it's like you don't have to follow that rule as much anymore. You can be a little bit pickier, because saying yes to everything kind of works a little bit against you at some point. But when you do that in the very beginning, it's like you need to do that in order to find like the people that will respect your work enough and value it enough to bring you onto stuff.